And
They're just floundering.
He's still there.
But yes, he is, and he's not going away because he shouts that a brand of rhetoric that seems to appeal to large swathes of the American populace, which is terrifying. The thing that bothers me that I don't understand at the moment is that Bernie Sanders has not handed over to Hillary Clinton.
No, he's still there.
Absolutely, and I think he has to have, or the winning candidate has to have something like 2,063 votes or something.
Yeah.
So some number like that, and neither of them can achieve this yet. But Bernie is relatively close. So why is everybody just denying that he's even in the race anymore, apparently in our media, when he said, I'm not going to stand down because it's going to come down to the final Democratic nomination, the last meeting they have, where the decision is made. And he has an equal chance of winning that at that time. That's what he said.
That's what he said, so what he reckons.
And I think it's probably true. So I don't understand why it's a sort of a done deal that Hillary is the Democratic party nominee, end of story. I don't understand that at the moment.
Professor Andrew Geddes. Not that we're leaving you much time today, Andrew. Good afternoon.
Sorry.
Yeah, hi.
A well-known political scientist at the University of Otago and, like many of us, following this saga. Andrew, just a few things. Maybe we can do them quickly today. First of all, the development with Trump saying he's open to Cruz as his running mate. This is a man who only 3 days ago called him a pathological liar and a serial philanderer. It won't be Cruz in the end, or could it be, as Trump's running mate, do you suspect?
Well, I'm not quite sure what Cruz would buy Trump if they were to put him in as the running mate. What Trump really needs is someone who can add a bit of gravitas to him, someone that, the Republicans can sort of say, well, even if Trump's a crazy person, at least he's got someone respectable behind him, and that's not Ted Cruz.
Bernie is fresh enough, isn't he, on the other side with his ideas to counter Trump? He's revolutionary in a different sense, a shaker-upper in a different sense. Is Hillary's danger that she may look dull next to Trump when the head-to-head goes? Yeah,
well, the thing with Hillary Clinton is everyone's got a view on her. There's going to be no freshness. No one's going to make up their mind, think, oh, suddenly Hillary, I've changed my mind about her. She's been around so long, everyone's got very, very strong views one way or the other about her. At the moment, less people hate Hillary Clinton than hate Trump, but a lot of people hate both of them. And this looks like it's the most negative US election there is. I mean, neither of the candidates have positive appeal, and that's what makes this a really, really strange contest.
But there aren't just two candidates, are there? Bernie's still there.
Okay, well, the thing with Bernie is, even though he's holding close in the popular vote amongst Democrats, the Democrats have 400 so-called superdelegates, people who are within the party and get to nominate their candidate purely because of their position within the party, and they're all solidly for Clinton. So they would have to swing and fall behind Bernie, and at the moment there doesn't seem to be any chance that they're going to do that. Right. They'd only do it if Bernie was to, pull ahead of Clinton in the popular vote, and he's just not there yet.
Andrew, there is a human impulse, isn't there, to both feel relief and at the same time affection for someone who you might think has monstrous ideas, who starts to soften and change tack. And might we observe that phenomenon happening from now on with Donald Trump?
Well, it's hard to know, because he has said, look, I will become more presidential, I will change my ways, but he just seems unable to do it. I mean, he did say, look, I will become more presidential, I will give presidential speeches, and then within days he was back to, labelling people losers and weak and et cetera, et cetera. It may just be that something about Donald Trump's nature is he thrives off this way of being, and whether he's actually able to change tack, like actually physically or emotionally able to do so, we just don't know yet.
Would you consider it a completely done deal that Hillary's going to beat him?
Every prediction has been made about Donald Trump so far has been wrong. So it's not a complete done deal, but when you look at the demographics of the US voting electorate, it's going to be really, really difficult for him. He's got to win in states that no Republican has won in since the mid-1990s. It would have to be completely different, but then again, everything about this election so far has been completely different.
Indeed it has. Professor Andrew Geddes, thank you. Peter Elliott, thank you.
Thank you.
And Susan Guthrie, nice to have you on too, Susan. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the Checkpoint team. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, lockdown at a Serco prison south of Auckland. The Minister will join us immediately after the news. Flooding in Porirua and the school that's now had to deal with it 3 times in a year. Is the stormwater system working there? We're in Canada's Fort McMurray with a man who found himself on a road out of town with flames everywhere he looked. A journalist in North Korea tells us about the stuff she's not able to see or do, but how even the showcase stuff is revealing of a state struggling to maintain any kind of facade. Trump is now the last man standing for the Republicans, and he's planning his presidency and his Mexican wall. And the Rolling Stones say he may have the Republican nomination in the bag, but he can't play this at his rallies. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards drawing a musical line in the sand. More on that and more coming up. But first, with RNZ News, here is Katrina Batten.
Kia ora, good evening. Part of a wing at South Auckland Prison has been locked down after a clash between prisoners and guards. The private prison operator Serco says 2 inmates assaulted staff on Saturday and later home brew was discovered in the wing. Serco won't give details of the incident but says the police are investigating. 42 of the 68 prisoners held in the wing have been locked up for longer than usual, but that's to be lifted tomorrow. Serco says 3 prisoners yesterday said they go on hunger strike, but today changed their minds. Serco was penalised more than $8 million by the government for mismanaging Mount Eden Remand Prison and has failed to have that contract renewed. The Wellington region is paying for a long, dry summer and autumn after heavy rain today failed to soak away, causing chaos for schools, some homeowners and people using the roads. Porirua, north of Wellington, bore the brunt with floodwaters up to 1 metre deep entering homes and schools. Te Tahi Bay, eastern parts of Porirua and Whitby have been the worst affected. The Wellington City Council has also received dozens of calls for help with flooding. Trevor Farmer of the region's Emergency Management Office says it's not just the amount of rain that's caused the problems.
It's just been exaggerated this year by the very, very dry summer and autumn. There's nowhere for that rain to be absorbed. And when we get high levels of rain, as we got this morning, it just shoots straight off. We get blockages in culverts and that spreads across to roads.
All the region's main highways are now open, but some local roads are not, and commuters are being warned to take care on the roads and plan for their journey today. And further north, the Palmerston North City Council is asking motorists to avoid unnecessary travel for the next few hours because of flooding. The Governor of the Canadian province of Alberta has declared a state of emergency as a huge wildfire sweeps across the city of Fort McMurray. Officials say the 1,600 homes and other buildings have been destroyed by the blaze, which is approaching the local airport. The entire population of Fort McMurray, 88,000 people, has been evacuated. Neil Scott, a local resident, says there was very little time to leave.
I left the restaurant, I looked up at the hill, I saw the smoke, and I went to my home. I started packing. Coming out of Fort McMurray, driving out, there was fire on the hillside. I could feel the heat through my car. The flames were 10 or 15 feet from my vehicle, burning by my vehicle.
Neil Scott, a resident fleeing Fort McMurray in Canada. The United Nations Refugee Agency has called for the immediate transfer of refugees and asylum seekers out of the Australian-run detention camps on both Manus Island and Nauru. A team from the UNHCR was on Nauru when Omid Masamali, a young Iranian man who died later in a Brisbane hospital, set himself on fire. Days later, a 21-year-old Somalian woman set herself alight and remains in a critical condition. The UN agency says there's no doubt that the current policy of offshore processing and prolonged detention is immensely harmful. Accident investigators are calling for changes to the way Robinson helicopters are operated as part of a report into a fatal crash. The pilot was killed in the March 2013 accident in the Kaweka Ranges in Hawke's Bay, and investigators say the crash is likely to be part of a problem with all Robinson helicopters being flown in New Zealand. Peter Newport reports.
The Robinson is well known for being a generally reliable and low-cost helicopter, but in New Zealand they've been involved in a high number of accidents, with over 130 crashes and at least 25 fatalities since the year 2000. The report into the 2013 accident says the main rotor blade hit part of the helicopter's fuselage, causing the aircraft to break up in flight. The pilot was killed. The investigators say that it is possible that turbulence and high winds contributed to the rotor blade's failure. If this is the case, they say attention needs to be paid to how all Robinson helicopters are flown in those conditions and how their pilots are trained. This is Peter Newport.
In sport, the former Warriors coach Matthew Elliott says he never went to the National Rugby League with the suspicions of drug abuse among players, as he had no proof. 6 members of the Warriors have been stood down from club and international duty after 5 of them admitting to mixing a cocktail of sleeping pills and energy drinks on a night out last week. Among them is the winger Manu Vatuvei, who has since been placed on medical leave. Elliott, who coached the Warriors for 18 months before being sacked in early 2014, has told Fox Sports in Australia he suspected players were abusing prescription medication, but he had nothing he could take to the NRL. He says coaches are often the last to find out about such things, but he believes the abuse of prescription medication is a problem throughout professional sport. It's an all-Spanish final in the Champions League with 10-time winners Real Madrid qualifying after beating Manchester City 1-0 this morning. Real will play Atletico in the final in a repeat of the decider 2 years ago, which Real won. And on the eve of the badminton horse trial in England, New Zealand's master horseman Sir Mark Todd has risen to number 3 in the world eventing rankings. German Michael Jung remains number 1 and this weekend will attempt to complete the Grand Slam, having already won Burghley and Kentucky. If successful, he'll pick up a $500,000 bonus. That's the news.
Heating up.
This is going to be the bloodiest, dirtiest, nastiest campaign you've ever seen in American history.
Seeing red.
Personal cost is a producer that I worked with who was pregnant when she was made redundant and her husband had already been made redundant.
Fleeing fire.
It's been the worst day of my career. The people here are devastated. Everyone's devastated. The community is going to be devastated.
Burning questions. Morning reports with Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson. Weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the Gisborne neighbourhood, which has brought down assault and child abuse statistics through a grassroots movement. And after 10, famed scholar, activist and political theorist Noam Chomsky offers his insights into the death of the American dream. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Gisborne mainly fine. Auckland to North Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Mostly cloudy with patchy rain or drizzle. South Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Rain with some heavy falls, easing and clearing overnight. Cloudy periods tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine and cloudy periods with remaining showers about Marlborough clearing today. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Southland, fine. Fiordland, drizzle developing about the fjords tonight, John, then turning to widespread rain tomorrow evening. And the Chatham Islands, fine tomorrow. It's 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. We appreciate it. We're just waiting for the Corrections Minister, Judith Collins, to give us a call. She's due to phone any second, but she is not there yet. So let's go to Porirua. Shall we begin in Porirua tonight? Heavy rain has caused chaos around the Wellington region today, trapping people in cars. Oh no, we've got her now. I think she's on the phone now. This is about the Serco story, another Serco-run prison. A wing at the South Auckland prison is in lockdown after a clash between prisoners and guards at the weekend. Serco says 2 prisoners attacked guards at the Wiri site. Wiri is really South Auckland on Saturday night, and homebrew was later found in the wing. 42 prisoners have been in lockdown since Monday. Yesterday, 3 of them threatened to go on a hunger strike, but Serco has just told us they've changed their mind. The incident has been reported to the police. I think we do have the Corrections Minister, Judith Collins, on the line now. Are you there, Minister?
Oh, yes, I am, John.
Thank you. It's nice to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us. When did you find out about this?
I found out about this today.
Right. It happened on Saturday night. Should they have told you before today?
Well, Corrections were advised. I've spoken directly with both the Chief Executive of Corrections this afternoon. I've also spoken with the Regional Commissioner, and she has advised me that she knew about this on Saturday. She was satisfied with the way in which Serco had handled the matter, and that's why it was not escalated up to me.
Right, it's Thursday though, isn't it? And you work on a no surprises regime. I mean,
I do, and I think that they'll certainly advised me of these sorts of matters straight away. And not all ministers like to know about them straight away. I certainly do. But what they've said to me is that, and I know this, so I don't expect them to tell me about every time there's every incident, because the sort of incident that we're talking about here is something that has happened from time to time in corrections facilities. That's what tends to happen if people, decide to do that, and the prisoners involved who were involved have been reclassified as maximum security, and they are now, no doubt about now, regretting what they did.
Okay, do you know what they did do? What are the facts as you understand them?
Well, I've got varying information, although the Regional Commissioner advised me that a couple of the prisoners had been involved in making homebrew, that they'd got drunk, that they'd assaulted and pushed around a couple of staff members of corrections officers, and that they had basically taken some keys and a radio, so that was immediately dealt with as a code blue, as they call it, and the matter was sorted out very, very quickly. So it's totally unacceptable behaviour from the prisoners, but I understand that Corrections is very satisfied with the way Serco handled it.
Are they very satisfied with the fact it happened? For example, homebrew. Should there be homebrew? Should there be prisoners getting drunk? Should the situation arrive that the prisoners are in this kind of state at all?
Well, of course not, John, but the fact is that prisoners do this from time to time in corrections facilities when they have access to food and all those sorts of things, and they do it. You're talking about self-care units where there is a lot of trust that's provided, and these people are coming out one day out of prison. So the fact is that does happen. Is it acceptable? Certainly not.
It's another Serco prison? It's another Serco prisoner?
No, not at all, actually, John. This happens in corrections-run prisons from time to time.
Well, sorry, when you say not at all, it is a Serco-run prison, isn't it, the Swearing Institute?
No, but it's not at all that's a Serco-run. I mean, for goodness sake, we had yesterday Corrections put out and started an inquiry into a prisoner in a corrections-run facility who had been tied on a bed for a month. And basically no one in the media seemed to be interested. And then we've got a situation where a couple of prisoners are drunk, they push around guards, they get themselves in a situation where they get punished for it, and it's bigger than that. I actually think that...
Well, wait a sec, hold on a sec. It is bigger than that, because in the prison where the prisoner was tied down, and I know nothing about this, so I apologise in advance.
Well, we put out a press release.
Okay, well, I haven't seen it. So in that prison, was an entire wing locked down for 4 days afterwards?
Well, a lockdown, yes. Well, probably not in that case.
Okay, so you're not comparing apples with apples. Minister, in the context of the Mount Eden $8 million fine, apology, end of contract, isn't it a little bit embarrassing that this is happening in a Serco institution?
Not at all. This happens in corrections facilities. It is not acceptable when it does, but it's the fact that Serco has acted in a way which Corrections was very happy with. They've said to me that they would have acted in exactly the same way. They've got to have prisoners understanding that there are consequences not only for their actions but for the actions of those who are part of their team. And look, they've also said to me that the prisoners who were not involved but who are in that unit are still undertaking their work that they do in the prison, that they're still undertaking their education. But the fact is that the prison manager has to be in charge and has to make those decisions.
Okay. What sort of condition are the guards in who were assaulted or attacked or pushed around, as you said? Do you know anything about their condition?
I've been advised that they are, in fact, well, so I haven't spoken to them myself yet, but I will be doing so. Okay. I will check myself because I like to know what's happening with those officers.
Thanks, Minister. Can we just broaden out slightly? When are we getting the latest prison performance tables that rank the performance of different prisons? Because they're late, aren't they?
Well, I haven't seen them. As soon as I get them, you'll get them, John.
Okay.
And it's something I will, in fact, ask the Corrections Chief Executive, because obviously I would rather know about this sort of incident, even if Corrections has decided that it's been handled properly and that they don't need to inform. But I like to know what's happening on these.
Judith Collins, Minister of Corrections, thank you very much indeed for your time. this evening, Minister. Let's go to Porirua now. Heavy rain has caused chaos across the Wellington region today, trapping people in cars, closing roads and forcing some people into evacuation centres. Heavy rain's been hitting Palmerston North, but we understand there is not a dramatic problem with flooding. One of the worst hit areas was Porirua. That's just up State Highway 1 from Wellington. If you don't know the capital, a school we visited has now been flooded 3 times in the past year. We'll go there in a moment. The rain was certainly torrential this morning, and we'll have more on that in a moment too. But first, people Checkpoint has spoken to suggest the flooding cleared very quickly after stormwater drains were unblocked, like Leanne Frost, who was outside her mum's house on Dimmock Street.
Yes, it came in really fast. About 10:30 it was probably really flooded. And when the fire brigade came in and blocked the holes, then it started going down really quickly.
So were all the drains, the stormwater drains, were they blocked, were they?
Yeah, yes, they were blocked. Yeah, we could see the fire brigade out in the storm and blocking them, and then soon the water at the front of my mum's house went down.
In fact, the water disappeared very dramatically. We're going to talk with the Mayor about that in a moment. Not far away from where Leanne was standing, the principal of Marairoa School says today was the 3rd time in a year her school has flooded after rain, 3 times in 12 months. All of the Decile 1 school's junior classrooms were damaged by flooding this morning, and the children were sent home. Kathleen O'Hare says children had to take shelter in the library while they waited to be picked up by their parents. Kathleen showed us around the school and talked us through the damage.
So if we go this way, the water came down the driveway here. So we had water up to probably about 30 centimetres up the door, and the water just came straight through the office admin area. It's come right through the ladies' toilets and men's toilets and down our corridor. Stopped at our office manager's door. I think it's a bit scared of our office manager because she's dealt with these a number of times. So through here, and if we go into the library, so this is probably the area. This is the area that we brought all the students into because we're at higher ground here, and we didn't want our seniors to be marooned down in their classrooms, but difficult to help them get home to their parents. If we come through to the junior classrooms, so along here, so these are our junior classrooms. And the water hit the other side of the junior classrooms and has come straight through the wall and about 1 metre into the classroom all along this whole block. So luckily these 2 classes are looking at getting refurbed, so classrooms have been moved into other parts of the school. So down here, if we go into our new entrant and our Year 1 class. So these are the classes where we have our younger students. They're a bit noisy, they've got dehumidifiers on in here. But the water came straight through behind the teacher's workstation there, and again into about 1 metre into the classroom, and in our new entrant classroom as well, which we can come through here. So in here we had, again, all along the window, the water was backed up outside the classrooms out here and nowhere to go except through the wall seam. So yeah, we had water right up and up to the red carpet really, and this is where all our new entrants were quite oblivious to the water coming in because they were doing their fitness, so that was good. They weren't freaked out too much about the water.
Kathleen O'Hare, whose school has been flooded 3 times in 12 months. Porirua Mayor Nick Leggett joins me now on the line. Welcome to Checkpoint. Nice to have you back on the program, Nick. Can we, just before we talk about the general situation, do you think you've got issues with stormwater infrastructure in some parts, particularly of Porirua East?
I think we've got it in, like most areas of the country, there are hotspots, and Maraeroa School is clearly one of those, and we've spent quite a bit of time and money on that area, and clearly we need to spend more.
Yeah, because we've spoken to people who said the water was there, the fire brigade turned up and cleared the drains, and suddenly it was gone just like that.
That's
so
right.
prima
Well,
facie, the flooding wouldn't be as bad if the water was able to get down those drains, right?
And the way that you let water down drains is by clearing them. So often, it's autumn, and we had a whole lot of rain in a really short space of time. So it was particular events at a high tide as well, which didn't help. But yeah, this is the thing. I mean, we've got one thing we've learned over the years is that you've got to keep clearing drains to allow the water to go through it with events like these. And today's another reinforcement of that for us.
Okay, so maybe that's something you need to increase the frequency of in autumn. But what about the overall assessment of damage? Now that actually a lot of the water's gone, how bad was it?
Well, as I say, I mean, we had about 36 millimetres in about half an hour, so it was a massive deluge. And what happened, a lot of us saw water going down the streets at pretty huge rates of knots, and it was quite scary actually. And within half an hour to an hour, a lot of it was completely cleared, and that's actually the stormwater system working as it should. And there are, of course, pockets where it's pulled a bit, and it's in probably 15 cases or so, it's gone onto people's homes or property. But generally, comparing it to the flood last year, we've actually it was a lot better for most people, other than a few cases, obviously.
Yeah. These are quite poor communities, aren't they? And they just can't afford to cope with flooding. They can't afford with the costs of that's a Decile 1 school, for example, Maraeroa. Is the council able to support people in the clean-up?
Yes, and we have. We've got an elderly lady whose home was affected. She's actually she's being cared for tonight by our welfare officers, and we've got other people who we're assessing the situation for them. Most people are pretty good. It certainly has not been to the extent, the impact hasn't been like it was a year ago, and certainly when we had some quite bad storms and floods about 4 years ago. But you learn from every situation, and for instance, Harotua Marae has been opened, today is on standby in case there are any people that need food and accommodation for the night.
Nick Leggett, Porirua, thanks very much indeed for joining us, Nick. We appreciate your time. Let's go to the Canadian province of Alberta now, where 88,000 people have now fled their homes in the biggest evacuation in Canadian history. Wildfires fanned by winds that keep causing the flames to change direction towards new and unburned areas have led to a state of emergency being declared. It's difficult to estimate damage because people have been unable to return yet to some areas of Fort McMurray. In a moment, we'll hear from local resident Russell Thomas, who describes the scene as he drove through the flames as apocalyptic. But first, this report from Vanessa Johnston.
The wildfire that erupted Sunday shows no signs of abating. All 80,000 residents of Canada's Fort McMurray have been evacuated. Joanne Bates says she's lost everything.
We asked the cops the other day, 2 days ago, to take our things out, and they wouldn't let us. We only have what we have on our backs.
But leaving town hasn't been so easy. Evacuees face the shutdown of a highway exit route as well as gasoline shortages. Now, amid hot, dry weather, firefighters are struggling to bring the blaze under control.
Prime Minister.
In Ottawa, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising to help those affected.
In Fort McMurray, the difficult times they're going through right now is something that we're going to unite around across the country.
The wildfire has struck right in the heart of Canada's oil sands in the province of Alberta. While oil sands facilities are not directly in the fire's path, the blaze is likely to disrupt operations and destroy some workers' homes. Firefighters are hoping for a break in the weather to help them bring the fire under control.
To give you a personal perspective on how fast the fire grew, Russell Thomas is hard to beat. Yesterday morning, Russell left his home in Fort McMurray to drive to a neighbouring town for a meeting. There was no fire when he left. He'd been there less than 30 minutes when he started receiving texts and calls saying Fort McMurray was on fire. He got into his car and drove back to Fort McMurray to help his family evacuate their home. But by this stage, the flames were so intense and moving so fast, he met them on his way back into town.
A bunch of us headed back to town as fast as we could, but we wanted to get back to our families, but we couldn't. We hit a massive apocalyptic wall of smoke and flame right at the top of the community before you go down to what we call the lower town site, or downtown where I live. And it was clear that, and the traffic wasn't moving. And the fire was getting closer and closer to the side of the highway, and I just recognized that I couldn't stay there anymore, so I actually pulled off into a parking lot that appeared to be somewhat safe for a moment to reassess my situation. And when I got out of the vehicle, the heat was so intense, and the wind, it was unbelievable. You say it's the most frightened you've ever been in your life, but I truly was. There was nothing that comes close to comparing to it. And other people that were in the same facility as me, they escaped later, and they drove through 2 walls of flames on both sides of the highway, and embers were shooting on top of their vehicles. I mean, it's indescribable. And so many thousands of people actually went through that experience. It's just really surreal.
And incredible that everyone seems to have made it out. I mean, I've seen footage that really does have precisely what you described, cars passing between 2 walls of flame on either side of the motorway, really close to them.
And there hasn't been, up to today, there hasn't been a fatality. I mean, I was incredibly fortunate. I made it out, and I'm now safe in Edmonton.
And property, do you know what sort of state your house is in? Is it still standing? Have you any idea?
Yeah, based on everything that we hear, there's a number of major residential areas in Fort McMurray that are intact. There's a number of in my area, from all accounts, we're okay at the moment. The other 2 major residential areas are relatively okay at the moment. We're probably going to get a better update tonight. Right now, at this very moment, the winds are gusting to 65, 70 kilometers an hour, and the temperature is extremely high, and the humidity is near zero. So it's absolutely the perfect storm at the moment, and that's what they predicted early this morning. So today, in some ways, is going to tell the tale, but tomorrow we have a cooler day forecast, and then the following day it's going to get back warm again. So we're not out of the woods yet, no matter what, and we'll see what happens. I mean, all we can do is hope and be prepared for the worst.
Russell Thomas, Fort McMurray resident, although not at the moment, obviously. Coming up, Donald Trump, he's a big music fan, but the Rolling Stones are saying, nope, none of our music at your rallies. And the Prime Minister says the Panama Papers scandal is a warning to New Zealand businesses to protect themselves from cyber hacking. And the push to get more New Zealanders into electric cars. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us 2101, email checkpoint@radioNZ.co.nz. And we have a Facebook page and a Twitter thingamajig. Feel free to communicate with us via any of them. It's always very good to hear from you. Donald Trump is now publicly making firm plans for his first 100 days as US president after his final rival in the race for the Republican nomination dropped out. Yesterday, of course, Ted Cruz went. We covered that. Today it was the Ohio Governor John Kasich who quit the race, clearing the way for Mr. Trump to become the Republican standard bearer this November. Of course, the Democrats have other ideas, but Trump's now planning his presidency. And within 3 months of his election, a wall between the US and Mexico will have been designed and a ban on Muslims entering the country will be in force. This is Trump full force. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks reports.
Governor John Kasich of Ohio was the last man standing between Donald Trump and the Republican Party's presidential nomination. And then on Wednesday evening, like Senator Ted Cruz before him, he bowed to the inevitable.
As I suspend my campaign today, I have renewed faith, deeper faith, that the Lord will show me the way forward and fulfill the purpose of my life.
That cleared the way for Donald Trump to become the only Republican seeking the presidency, and therefore the man whose name will be on the ballot this November. It was a dizzying day in US politics, one that saw the Republican Party chairman Reince Priebus race to television studios to urge Republicans to rally round the winner.
We need time to unify, and we will unify, but this is what today starts, which is this unification process.
But Mr. Priebus knows this has been no ordinary primary contest, and the blood that has been spilled on the Republican carpet over the last few months is deep and may prove indelible. Several prominent figures within the party say they won't ever endorse Donald Trump for the presidency, and some are planning to boycott the Republican convention this summer. Mr. Trump, who increasingly is trying to sound presidential, told Fox News that he's beginning to weigh up possible running mates.
I'm considering a lot of people, to be honest, and I'll let you guys know, but I really am. I'm considering a lot of people, and we want to have great at every level, whether it's VP or anything else. We want greatness.
And greatness, he pledged, will be achieved in Washington within the first 100 days of his presidency. He told the New York Times that if elected, he'll go on a charm offensive with congressional leaders, approve the design for the wall that he wants to build between the US and Mexico, implement a ban on Muslims entering the country, and begin an audit of the US Federal Reserve. Acknowledging those ideas might unsettle people, he said things will be fine, and insisted he's not seeking the presidency simply to create instability for the country. For Checkpoint, I'm Simon Marks in Washington.
Meanwhile, the Rolling Stones have told Donald Trump to stop using their music for his campaign after effectively sealing the Republican nomination, as you just heard Simon saying. Mr. Trump played the Stones' hit Start Me Up as he left the stage following his victory speech. The Stones aren't happy, John Russell reports.
The Rolling Stones told Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump on Wednesday to stop using the band's music for his campaign. A band spokesperson said in a statement that the Rolling Stones have never given permission to the Trump campaign to use their songs and have requested that they cease all use immediately.
Thank you very much.
Trump used the band Start Me Up while at a rally in New York on Tuesday, blasting the tune before he reached the podium, and again immediately after the speech. A representative for Trump's campaign didn't respond to a request for comment on Wednesday. The Rolling Stones are not alone. Other artists have asked the candidate to stop using their music, including Adele and REM.
That's our music. It's by Lawrence Arabia. We got permission to use it. It's 5:32 on Checkpoint. It's great to have you with us. Coming up, a government push to get more New Zealanders into electric cars sets a 5-year target of 60,000 vehicles. The Prime Minister says the Panama Papers scandal is a warning to New Zealand businesses to protect themselves from cyber hacking. And Kiwis captain Jesse Bromwich ahead of their big game against the Kangaroos tomorrow night. Really charming chat with him. Nona's coming up. Nona, who is Canadian, we hasten to add, is coming up with the headlines, business headlines, but first here's Katrina Batten with the news.
The Corrections Minister Judith Collins says her department is satisfied with the way the private prison operator Serco handled a clash at the Wiri prison over the weekend. Part of a wing at the South Auckland prison is still in lockdown after an incident between prisoners and guards. Serco says 2 inmates assaulted staff on Saturday. Ms Collins told Checkpoint the prisoners' behaviour was totally unacceptable. Heavy rain, which caused flooding in the lower North Island, is easing, but some roads remain closed and commuters are urged to be cautious. Porirua, north of Wellington, bore the brunt of today's downpour, with floodwaters up to 1 metre deep entering homes and schools. Further north, the Palmerston North City Council is asking motorists to avoid unnecessary travel for the next few hours because of flooding. A state of emergency is in place as a huge wildfire sweeps across the evacuated Canadian city of Fort McMurray. Officials fear that the fire may destroy much of the city in the province of Alberta. They say 1,600 homes and other buildings have been destroyed by the blaze. The entire population of Fort McMurray, 88,000 people, has been evacuated. The United Nations Refugee Agency has called for the immediate transfer of refugees and asylum seekers out of the Australian-run detention camps on both Manus Island and Nauru. The UN agency says there's no doubt that Australia's policy of offshore processing and prolonged detention is immensely harmful to the detainees. Accident investigators are calling for changes to the way Robinson helicopters are operated as part of a report into a fatal crash. A pilot was killed in the March 2013 accident in the Kāweka Ranges in Hawke's Bay, and investigators say the crash is likely to be part of a problem with all Robinson helicopters being flown in high winds or turbulence. Those are the headlines. I'll have more news, sport and weather at 6.
Which is 25 and a half minutes away. Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. Expat Canadian New Zealander now, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, I unreservedly apologise. Nona, another day, another bank profit results.
That's right. Spent a lot of time with banking today. Absolutely. The Bank of New Zealand, that was the sort of the trifecta. So we've got the last of the 3 big ones this week.
So we've had Westpac, ANZ and the BNZ now.
Yes, the BNZ. And very much the same as what we've seen in the other results. Squeezed by low interest rates, so that's squeezing their profits. However, they're still profitable. And of course, bad debt provisioning associated with the dairy sector. However, just like the other banks, the Bank of New Zealand has been working with the dairy sector trying to limit that risk. Over the last few months, or actually a year and a half, they've been working with the dairy industry. So it's kind of been a slow creep. And I think because it's cyclical, the banks have been here before.
Yeah.
And they're diversifying. And, you know, the Bank of New Zealand, I spent quite a bit of time speaking with the chief executive this afternoon, and he was saying that, you know, the agriculture sector offers a great opportunity for growth for the New Zealand economy, away from commodity sector. So, you know, less reliance on dairy and those kind of commodities that, you know, we're so tied to, and more for those value-added agricultural products.
Mike Moore. Wasn't Mike Moore saying that when he was Minister of Trade?
It was all about the lamb burgers,
yeah,
wasn't
well,
it?
he was. In fact, wasn't Bill Such saying that about half a century ago?
Well, they all tasted pretty good as far as I know.
Yeah, okay. What was the BNZ's number? Have you got the actual number?
Yeah, I do. I actually have their number. Yeah, they made $451 million in that first half period, which is, you know, a pretty penny, actually.
Yeah.
Their revenue was a little lower at $1.13 billion. So it's still quite a big number, just the same. And, yeah, their lending, there was a bit of a gain in lending. And but yeah, again, they face some challenges. And, you know, the banking sector is very important to the New Zealand economy. So, yeah, I mean, their profits are shrinking. They're looking at new ways to make money. As long as the economy is sound, we should be okay.
Okay. Nona, what were the market numbers today?
Yeah, the market numbers. Okay, so the index rose about 0.75%. That's the top 50 index. That's our share market, by 52 points to 6,876. And our New Zealand dollar, 69 US cents, and Australia 92 cents.
Wow, that's strong.
Yeah, it is actually strong. It's been holding there for a while, though.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that New Zealand dollar just keeps flying high, huh?
Yeah, with interest rates at 2.25, it's extraordinary.
Well, there's always the chance that they'll come down, as you keep saying.
Yeah, okay. Nona Peltier, Auckland Business Reporter. Thank you so much, Nona. Nice to see you in here, as always. The Prime Minister says the Panama Papers scandal is a warning to New Zealand businesses to protect themselves from cyber hacking. John Key today announced a $22 million fund to help set up a national team of security experts aimed at protecting businesses and infrastructure from online attacks. Mohammed Hassan reports.
Speaking at the Cybersecurity Summit in Auckland this morning, John Key warned that New Zealanders need to start taking the threat of cybersecurity seriously.
This is real, it's happening, and there are people sitting out there who just want to make mischief and want to get access to that information. They present a real threat to New Zealand businesses, to the government and to NGOs. And if we're going to do our jobs properly, we better start realising actually that we've got to take this issue seriously.
Mr. Key says the government is budgeting $22 million towards the setup of a national computer emergency response team, which it announced in December. $20 million will go towards operating funds over the next 4 years, and $2.2 million will be new capital, with the centre expected to open in 2017. But Mr. Key says it's not just up to the government to take action.
We can't make you do that for your businesses. You as directors of those companies or chief executives have to want to do it yourselves. But we are, through the CERT and through all of the other work that GCSB and the police and others do, quite willing to work with you and help you and provide the best technology that we can.
He says the massive information leak from the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca which unearthed global tax avoidance practices, is proof no company is safe from hacking.
Whatever the rights and wrongs of whatever business they do, these people have sat there thinking they are dealing with their clients on a confidential basis. And all of a sudden, if the media reports are right, their information has been hacked and is now in the public domain. You might be a doctor's surgery that's dealt with sexually transmitted diseases, and that information is confidential to that person. And all of a sudden, that information can be in the public domain.
The Vice President of Security at Microsoft, Matt Tomlinson, says there's no shortage of malicious actors on the internet, and the consequences go beyond just business interests.
The worst case scenarios here are alarming because we do have things like critical infrastructure and governments supplying services over the internet. Taking down a router, it's not clear if taking down that router just takes out a business down the street or whether it takes down a hospital.
The program director for the Centre of Strategic and International Studies, Jim Lewis, says New Zealand has a good strategy for tackling cybersecurity, but that needs to be well-resourced.
New Zealand has put in place many of the elements of a successful strategy, and you've identified many of the things you have to work on to make that strategy work. The real test is in implementation, and the real test is in political commitment.
Jim Lewis says New Zealand faces real threats, and its businesses are at risk. He says it's a risk that's manageable, but only if companies take action. For Checkpoint, Mohammed Hassan.
20-6 on Checkpoint. North Korea's capital, Pyongyang, is draped in patriotic banners and coloured flags for the secretive Asian nation's first ruling party congress in 36 years. Workers' Party leader Kim Jong-un is expected to make a big announcement at the Congress, which kicks off tomorrow, though it's unclear whether that will be related to the country's growing nuclear power capacities. Foreign media have unusually been invited to North Korea, though their movements are really limited. Amongst them, Washington Post correspondent Anna Fifield, an expat Kiwi who's based in Tokyo but up in North Korea at the moment. And I asked her about, well, trying to be a journalist in, well, possibly the most, arguably, definitely the most repressive state on the planet.
So North Korea is not fond of foreign journalists and their pesky questions, to say the least. And so I do have a government-appointed minder who's with me all the time. I can see him right now. He's having a conversation with somebody else, but he's certainly not standing next to me listening. And even if he was, I still feel, that I will say what I need to say here. I cannot choose my schedule. Every morning we're told to be in the lobby at 8:30 or whatever, and they take us where they want us to take us to. So right now I'm standing at the Pyeongchon Revolutionary Site, which was the site of the first munitions factory in North Korea. So they have chosen to bring me here. I did not request to come here. So my schedule is not up to me, but I can report what I want to report.
The paradox of something like that is that it's simultaneously breathtakingly dull, almost stupefying, and absolutely fascinating. And also, as you're going there, do you see ordinary life in any way out the window of the car or the bus or whatever?
We are in Pyongyang, and Pyongyang is home to the most elite people. So this is by no means the real North Korea. We see people who are well-dressed and have good government jobs. But still, it's really telling even being here and seeing what it means to be elite in North Korea, because we can see they have buses, but often the buses are broken down. People are fixing things. There are long lines on the side of the road. People are still walking everywhere with great big, bundles on tops of their heads or on their backs. So it's still very poor. But the thing that strikes me most of all is not the poverty so much, but the repression, the fact that I cannot have a conversation with a normal person. And in fact, I don't even try to do that anymore, because all I do is endanger that person. I will never get an honest answer out of them, but I will put them at risk, because everybody around them will say that person had a conversation with a foreigner. It is very restricted.
And this is showcasing. This is showcasing North Korea. I mean, this is the stage managed stuff. This is the stuff you're able to see. So you begin to guess at life beyond that, and the conclusions you reach are pretty terrible, really, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. If they take you somewhere and they say this is the best hospital in North Korea, and that hospital doesn't have electricity, you can extrapolate quite a lot from that to imagine what the worst hospital or a normal hospital in North Korea is like. But I have to say that this is my 7th visit to Pyongyang. I started coming here in 2005. And so over the course of that time, I have been able to see quite a lot of change in Pyongyang itself, not in the rest of the country, which is still mostly off limits to me. But for example, there are many more cars on the road. There are many, many more buildings, like high-rise towers, lots of lights. I went last night to a German restaurant where they were serving North Korean beer and Wiener Schnitzel. And there were lots of lots of elite North Koreans in there eating and drinking and paying, Western kind of prices for things. So if you are elite in North Korea, your life has definitely gotten better over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, as long as no one's blown you up or just summarily executed you if you've offended the great leader or whatever. What about this party Congress?
Yeah, their lives did not get better.
No.
Yeah.
No, what about the ruling party Congress, which is coming up? I mean, this is a big set-piece occasion, right?
It's a big deal, right. It's starting at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, we've just been told. This is the first time this Congress has been held in 36 years, so before even the current leader, Kim Jong-un, was born. So we can't apply the old template about North Korean Workers' Party Congresses to this one. We don't really know why he's called it or what to expect. Some people say it might be used to announce some big major policy change, maybe on the economic front, but my money is on a show of solidarity, a kind of reiteration of the power of the party and the wise leadership of Kim Jong-un and this kind of stuff. I think he's going to use it to show that he's a legitimate leader and to try and consolidate his rule here. And I've got to say, they are really pulling out all the stops for this. Pyongyang is looking good by North Korean standards. There are banners and flags everywhere. A lot of people on the street have been practicing for parades and marches, and we hear revolutionary music all around town trying to whip up a bit of fervor for this event. So, there's a lot of anticipation, that's for sure.
Anna Fifield, who is the Washington Post correspondent, she's based in Tokyo, files from Japan, but she's gone across to North Korea. Pretty remarkable place for her to be able to visit. Expat Kiwi doing very well with the Washington Post. A government plan to boost the number of electric cars has barely got into gear, but it's already attracting criticism that it won't do enough to encourage everyday drivers behind a much more eco-friendly wheel. The new electric vehicle policy has set a target of lifting the number of those vehicles on the road from about 2,000 now, that's nationwide, to more than 60,000 in the next 5 years. Kate Newton reports.
It's really nice to drive, and it's zippy, so it doesn't feel any different to any other car other than quiet.
The little electric hatchback John Key took for a spin round Auckland's Domain this afternoon got the Prime Minister's thumbs up. But Mr Key says it won't be replacing the Crown BMW that was idling out the front of the Auckland War Memorial Museum anytime soon.
I think when they did the procurement for the cars that we use, which at the moment are the BMWs, they had a look to see whether there was something in that category that might work. I was involved in the process, so you'd have to go and ask them, but my understanding was that it didn't quite match up to what we want at the moment.
He's hoping that the package announced today, though, will help thousands more people behind the wheel of an electric car.
The logics of these cars are very compelling. You can fill them up for 30 cents a litre. It's a beautiful car to drive. It was incredibly quiet, and you can just imagine them being the car of the future because they make sense both economically and will increasingly so over time as the price comes down, but also environmentally.
The policy package, which totals about $100 million over the next 5 years, aims to double the number of electric cars in New Zealand year on year until 2021. That includes investigating the possibility of government departments and large businesses teaming up to bulk purchase electric car fleets, removing road user charges for electric vehicles for the next 5 years, and letting electric vehicles travel in bus and transit lanes. But the plan's getting a red light from the Green Party's transport spokeswoman, Julianne Genter.
Their policy is allowing electric vehicles to use bus lanes, which will seriously disrupt public transport services in our most congested cities. But there's no new tax breaks for electric vehicles. So ultimately, it'll only be a small number of New Zealanders who are able to afford electric vehicles.
Ms Genter says the government instead should have removed the fringe benefit tax on electric vehicles, which would make it much more attractive for companies to replace their fleets. In the meantime, though, the government is motoring ahead, with the Transport Minister Simon Bridges hoping to announce bulk purchasing plans later this year. For Checkpoint, Kate Newton.
The chime on Checkpoint is almost 11 minutes to 6. Fears that a big increase in the number of criminals deported from Australia would unleash a crime wave in New Zealand appear unfounded. Police figures show only 5% of those sent back since new parole-like conditions were introduced in November have offended, compared with 23% before the law change. However, some working at the front line warn lack of support could put some at risk of falling back into crime. Ruth Hill reports.
A police intelligence report from November, released under the Official Information Act, warns a number of deportees have been socialising together, which is likely to raise the risk of them offending in groups. Helen Murphy, who runs the agency in Christchurch, charged with the job of helping prisoners find their feet, says she often puts new arrivals in touch with those who have already settled in. The manager of Christchurch PARS, formerly known as the Prisoners Aid and Rehabilitation Society, is not surprised rates of offending are lower than expected. Police have told her they're more worried about prisoners getting out of Christchurch Men's Prison than those arriving from Australia.
Sometimes I've had to grab them and say, whoa, settle down. They're ready to hit the ground and go running. Well, we just know that they would burn out very fast. One man was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, door knocking on every building site.
The police report estimates the cost of crimes committed by deportees could top $126 million within 6 years. However, the Police Minister, Judith Collins, says that figure was calculated before the government pushed through changes last year, imposing parole-like conditions for deportees. In the 5 months following the law change, 10 of the 188 people deported in that period, or just 5%, have been involved in 13 criminal incidents, compared with 23% prior to that. Local GP Jeremy Baker, who carries out health assessments for deportees, says most are suffering some form of post-traumatic stress from being uprooted from their lives and families. He's disappointed by the lack of support from central government.
Medical services are stretched. The support workers are stretched. Resources around Christchurch, we've debated how they can be improved, but I think just monetary resourcing is not being provided for this.
Labour MP Kelvin Davis says if the government really expects crime by deportees to cost more than $100 million, it should be investing more in supporting them now.
They've got no job, they've got no roof over their head. If they don't get the right sort of social support, then they may have to resort to crime to get by. So these people are in a dire situation, and if it backfires, it's going to be New Zealanders who are going to be the victims of their crimes.
Mr Davis says most deportees he's met just want to go straight, so one day they may get the chance to return to the place they call home, Australia. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
The time on Checkpoint is just coming up to 8 minutes to 6 after a pretty tough week or two for rugby league in New Zealand, with the Warriors being thrashed by Melbourne and then forced to stand down players who'd gone out late, reportedly consumed tramadol and energy drinks, and then been late for a team meeting the next day. The Kiwis, which is the national team of course, get to redefine the narrative tomorrow night. New Zealand play Australia in their annual rugby league test, which is in Newcastle tomorrow. The Kiwis are attempting to successfully defend the Anzac Trophy for the first time ever. Last year, New Zealand won the trophy for just the second time since the competition's inception in 1997. So basically, well, it's going for the third ever win in that time. But the team named to defend it is lacking a number of big names, including the senior Warriors duo of Manu Vatuvai and Ben Matalino, out after that late night episode, and captain Simon Mannering. Stepping into Mannering's shoes is the Melbourne Storm prop, Jesse Bromwich. His first game as Kiwis captain, a league-mad South Auckland kid who's become a star in Melbourne and is now the Kiwis skipper.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the proudest of my career, and thank you. Like you said, it's definitely a big occasion for myself and my family too.
Tell me about how you found out you were captain and what you did. Did you give your family a call?
I found out on Wednesday night. And I told my partner, and straight away she started crying. So it's a bit emotional in my house at home, and something that we really cherish. But after that, I rang my dad told him not to tell anyone. The next minute I had the whole family texting me, so I don't know if I'll be telling him any more secrets.
Although he's proud, right? Because he's a hard-out leaguer, your dad, isn't he? And so this is a big thing for you guys, isn't it?
Yeah, he's been a massive leaguey all his life, and, you know, I think he was just that happy and proud for me, and he just had to go and tell everyone, I guess.
Who did you look up to when you were a kid? When you were a little guy, who did you want to be?
When I was a kid, I was a massive Warriors supporter, being born and bred in Manurewa. So I guess guys like Stacey Jones and even Ruben Wiki, guys like that. You know, I love Ali, big Ali Lauatiti. I used to love watching him play as well.
Yeah, they all played for the Kiwis. And so now, of course, there's a generation of kids who feel the same way about you, which is kind of wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, when you put it like that, it is. But, you know, it's something I haven't really thought of yet. I've been, I guess, busy this week and hasn't really sunk in too much at the moment.
It's hard to beat the Aussies. I mean, you know, and it's a tough encounter. And you guys are without some players that you might have expected to have. What are you going to say to the boys before the game? What's your role as captain? What will you tell them?
Yeah, it is tough. Firstly, it is tough to beat the Australians, but you know, we don't think about that. For me, I'll be, I guess, just telling the boys to, I guess, to protect what the coach Stephen Kearney and the coaching staff and all the other players have built over the last 2 years. So for me, it's about us going out there and protecting what they've built over the last few years and the culture they've brought in, and I guess getting that message across for the boys and what they'll be doing to help protect that.
Jesse, you play a lot of rugby league and you play for the Storm, you know, and boy, not long ago you dealt to the Warriors by 42 points. How does it feel different when you put a Kiwis jersey on? How does that change what's going on in your heart, for example?
Oh, I guess firstly you're playing for your country, so you know that's another level of being, I guess, proud, and that's another level and how you have to play. So yeah, I guess straight away when you put that black and white jumper on, that's different straight away. There you're playing for your country and representing your family, and now representing, I guess, all of New Zealand. So yeah, it's something that I'm really looking forward to, and it's something that makes me proud.
Jesse Bromwich, who was named Kiwis skipper, something that makes him proud, and the community he's from very proud too. We'll have more on that a bit later. The death of Australia's most wanted terrorist is being hailed as a significant blow to Islamic State's recruitment of Australians. Melbourne man and Islamic State member Neil Prakash was reportedly a key player in working to inspire violent terrorism in Australia and was believed to have been involved in foiled Anzac Day terror plots. He was killed in a US airstrike on Friday night. The ABC's Lexi Metherell reports.
Rumours of the death of Neil Prakash first began in January, but we now know he was still alive, up until last Friday, when the US government says it killed him in an American airstrike. The Attorney-General George Brandis has told Sky News that Australia helped.
Australia did cooperate with the United States in relation to the identification and location of Prakash.
Senator Brandis says the death is significant in the fight against terrorism on home soil and in frustrating Islamic State recruitment.
He was actively involved both in recruitment and in encouraging domestic terrorist events in Australia. He was the principal Australian reaching back from the Middle East into Australia, and in particular to terrorist networks in both Melbourne and Sydney.
Neil Prakash was reportedly involved in foiled terror plots on last year's and this year's Anzac Day commemorations in Australia. He also apparently had some influence on the 18-year-old who was killed after stabbing 2 police officers in Melbourne in 2014. The Director of Terrorism Studies at Charles Sturt University, Levi West.
Prakash explicitly stated that he knew Newman Hayter personally, so we know he'd had a role in the radicalisation
definition broadly of human hater.
Associate Professor at the Australian National University's National Security College, Roger Shanahan, says the number of Australians attempting to fight with IS has been dwindling, and Neil Prakesh's death is a further blow to its cause. He says it's likely IS will now portray Neil Prakash as a martyr, but that's unlikely to persuade Australians to join the group.
Once he's no longer alive and everybody now knows that he's been killed, he's likely to be less influential in motivating people to join Islamic State, given that it's led to his death, as well as those of about 50 other Australians.
ASIO has told the government 50 to 59 Australians have now been killed fighting with the Islamic State group. It's believed they include Sydney men Khalid Sharoof, Mohammed Alamar and Mohammed Ali Bariale. Senator Brandis says ASIO has advised him that there are still 110 Australian foreign fighters in Iraq or Syria. Levi West from Charles Sturt University says it's not clear who will fill the void left by Neil Prakash.
Within the open source information, there's not a lot and too many other Australians of substantive profile, certainly not in the way that Prakash was.
The national security editor of the Australian newspaper, Paul Maley, has reported extensively on Neil Prakash and says the Islamic State fighter once threatened him with beheading.
He had a difficult upbringing. He was the son of a Cambodian and Fijian Indian migrants. He converted to Islam at the Al Furqan Centre, which was a hub for radical teaching down in Melbourne. So he embraced Islam quickly, and he embraced Islam enthusiastically and with all the fervour of a convert. It's very difficult to know exactly what it was that tipped him over. Before that, he was a lonely, lost sort of a guy. You know, he was a gang member. He had problems with drugs. He was a failed hip-hop artist. He was sort of on the fringes. So I think he was one of these people who all through his life has been looking for something to belong to.
The US has also confirmed that it has killed the sister of Fahad Jabbar, who shot dead police employee Curtis Cheng in Sydney last year. Shadi Jabbar Khalil Mohammed and her husband, who are IS members, died in an airstrike in Al-Bab near Aleppo in Syria.
Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National, on the radio as always, also screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and streaming live on the RNZ website. That report from the ABC bringing us up slightly past 6 o'clock. I apologise to Pip fans everywhere. However you're doing so, thank you for joining us tonight. In the next 30 minutes, the aftermath of the flooding in Porirua. Labour questions a donor-paid China trip for National MPs. And the 15-year-old speaking up for his community because he's proud of it and he's sick of being written off because he's from it. The community is Mangere and he will join us a bit later in the half hour. But before all of that, Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Corrections Minister Judith Collins says her department is satisfied with the way the private prison operator Serco handled a clash at the Wiri prison over the weekend. Part of a wing at the South Auckland prison is still in lockdown after an incident between prisoners and guards. Serco says 2 inmates assaulted staff on Saturday and later home brew was discovered in the wing. Judith Collins told Checkpoint the prisoners also took keys and a radio from the staff.
So that was immediately dealt with as a code blue, as they call it, and the matter was sorted out very, very quickly. So it's totally unacceptable behaviour from the prisoners, but I understand that Corrections is very satisfied with the way Serco handled it.
The Corrections Minister Judith Collins. Heavy rain, which flooded 14 homes in Porirua, is easing, but some roads remain closed and motorists are urged to be cautious. Porirua's Emergency Operations Centre was activated at 10 a.m, with floodwaters more than a metre deep in some places. Leanne Frost, who was on Dimmock Street, says their road flooded fast.
The next door neighbour's house, all her front flooded and her fence went down by the water. It came in really fast. And when the fire brigade came in and blocked the holes, then it started going down really quickly.
The fire service received about 58 call-outs about flooding and some schools were closed. The heavy rain then moved north to Palmerston North, where 3 streets, Birmingham Street, Friars Road and Apollo Parade, are still closed due to surface flooding. Met Service says the rain is easing. Wellington's DHB has begun legal action against 3 construction companies, including Fletcher's, over extensive pinhole leaks in the pipes at the regional hospital built just 8 years ago. Fletcher was the main contractor in the $300 million plus project. The legal action also targets Becker, which provided design and engineering services, and Crane Group in Australia, which made the copper pipes. The DHB Chief Executive Debbie Chin says it's not acceptable to have leaking plumbing in the hospital. She says the leaks will be managed so health services are maintained. A state of emergency has been declared in the Canadian province of Alberta as a huge wildfire sweeps across the city of Fort McMurray. Officials say 1,600 homes have been destroyed by the blaze. The city's entire population, 88,000 people, has been evacuated. Rachel Notley is Alberta's Premier.
Our province is strong and we will get through this. Albertans have proven time and time again that when disaster strikes, we come together and we find the solutions and we get through it.
Rachel Notley, Alberta's Premier. The government is to investigate the bulk purchase of electric cars in a bid to get 64,000 of them on the road, and it will make them exempt from road user charges until they make up 2% of all cars on the road. At the moment, there are only about 2,000 electric vehicles. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says bulk purchasing would be for government departments and large corporate fleets, but the policy should help ordinary drivers too.
Ultimately, if we can build the network of cars through the business community buying them through their bulk fleets, then that will certainly flow through the second-hand market. But the road user charge is another thing that'll help a private individual.
However, John Campbell says measures such as removing GST from electric vehicles would complicate New Zealand's tax system. The police have accepted the findings by the Independent Police Conduct Authority, clearing them of using excessive force, but criticising the way an officer subdued a man when arresting him. A 17-year-old was taken into custody for disorderly behaviour outside a Hamilton nightclub in April last year. Andrew McRae reports.
The man's hand was badly injured when he was loaded into a police van, and he complained about excessive force. The authority rejected that, but says an officer used a technique to subdue the man, involving thumb pressure applied behind the earlobe, which is not allowed. The Waikato District Commander Bruce Bird says the police accept that. He says staff have been made aware of other courses of action that can be considered in such circumstances. In Hamilton, Andrew McRae.
In sport, the Kiwis Rugby League team has been dealt another blow in the lead-up to tomorrow night's Anzac Test against the Kangaroos. Centre Sean Kenny-Dowell has been ruled out because of ligament damage in his foot. The Kiwis already have had a host of injuries, player withdrawals due to personal problems and the axing of 6 Warriors for mixing energy drinks with prescription drugs on a night out. But coach Stephen Kearney remains confident his side can beat the Kangaroos.
We haven't spent a great deal of time on no time on who we don't have here. It's the boys that we do have here, and they've adapted really well. A couple of new faces into camp. Yeah, it's been a really good preparation for us.
Stephen Kearney. 3 of New Zealand's leading try scorers returned to the Super Rugby competition for this Saturday's local derby between the Chiefs and Highlanders in Hamilton. The All Black wing, Waisake Naholo, will start on the right wing for the Highlanders after being out with a broken leg since week 1. Centre Charlie Ngatai and wing James Lowe return from injury for the top of the table Chiefs. The Australian tennis player Bernard Tomic has raised eyebrows following his first-round loss to Fabio Fognini at the Madrid Masters. Down 6-2, 5-4 and love 40 on match point, Tomic held his racket by the strings and didn't even attempt a return shot. When asked by journalists about his antics, Tomic said, "I don't care about that match point. Would you care if you were 23 and worth over $10 million? That's the news.
Coming up on Nights, the Forgotten Girls of Dhaka. A group of teenage girls in a Bangladesh slum who were married and then abandoned by their husbands before they even reached the age of 16. Our Changing World explores whitebait mysteries. What happens, genetically speaking, when a wild plant is domesticated? Also, Game Planet reviewer Andrew Todd on a major esports event he's just attended in Warsaw. That's all on Nights tonight on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Gisborne mainly fine. Auckland to North Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupō, mostly cloudy with patchy rain or drizzle. South Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Rain with some heavy falls, easing and clearing overnight. Cloudy periods tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury fine and cloudy periods with remaining showers about Marlborough clearing today. Nelson, Buller and Westland and Southland fine. Fiordland, here we go, John. Drizzle developing about the fjords tonight, then turning to widespread rain tomorrow evening. And it's just about the fjords. And the Chatham Islands fine tomorrow. It's 6:08.
It's wet. It's wet around the fjords.
It's always wet in the fjords.
Apparently, we've just heard from the Met Service it's dry in the Atacama Desert.
Oh, that's
splendid.
fantastic.
So
Excellent.
things are as they should be, Katrina Batten. Thank you very much indeed. It's 6:08. Katrina just said that. But we like to tell the time on Checkpoint, and we have both analogue and digital in the studio, so we can do so twice. Returning now to the flooding in Porirua, north of Wellington, torrential rain there this morning flooded out streets, trapped people in their cars and forced some people into evacuation centres. The worst of the weather appears to be over, although, as Katrina said, it's really hit in part of Palmerston North. But those worst hit now face a clean-up job. Kathleen O'Hare is the principal of Marairoa School in Porirua. They've been hit 3 times in a year by flooding. I asked her what happened this morning.
About 8:45, I headed up to the front gate because we've got a bit of a dip in the road at the top there, and I just went up to check the water. Dads and mums were dropping off their children, and a couple of them sort of said, should we be coming? And it's like, well, I think we're okay. But by the time I got to the top of the drive, it was quite obvious that we were going to get very wet and very quickly after getting to the top of the drive, actually.
So what did you do?
I came back down and I just said to our office manager, we need to start lifting any electrical stuff off the floor because this water's coming, just like it did last year. And so we quickly went around. We have a lot of fantastic support staff. Just put the word out to them. They went through all the classrooms, especially in our junior block, which is just along here, because that's where the water hits first. And anything that was cardboard or laying on the floor, lifted off the ground, and everybody just jumped in really quickly and got that sorted prior to the water arriving in the classrooms.
Have you bought drying machines in? How are you drying the carpets now? How are you tidying up?
So we had, I think our office manager has ChemDry on speed dial. So as soon as we knew the water was coming, ChemDry were pretty much the second phone call. And we had them in here. They were sucking up all the water with their big vacuum cleaners. And we've got about 5-6 dryers in the classroom at the moment, and a couple of dehumidifiers as well. So they've got here pretty quickly, which helps a lot.
And will you be back to normal tomorrow? Classes, schools, everything as per usual?
As per usual, yep. We believe that, ChemDry have told us that it should be fine by tomorrow. It's in the classrooms. Admin's still going to be a bit damp, but we'll cope okay in admin. And, back to normal as long as this rain stays away. So, yeah.
Kathleen O'Hare tidying up for the 3rd time in a year at Marairoa School in Porirua. The Waitangi Tribunal has found a treaty clause in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is likely to provide a reasonable protection for Māori interests, but it does have concerns about the deal. This has been much discussed, particularly around the time the treaty was being signed, the TPP was being signed. More than 20 claimants challenged the Crown over the TPP deal about everything from the consultation process to economic benefits. Our Māori Issues correspondent, Mihinarangi Forbes, has been looking at this.
Māori singer Moana Maniopoto had described the Trans-Pacific trade deal as the biggest game changer since the signing of the treaty. Earlier this year, the musician exchanged her microphone for a loud hailer, taking to the streets with thousands of other New Zealanders marching against the TPP. Ms Maniopoto was hoping for a different script from the Waitangi Tribunal, which today found there was no breach of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi arising from the trade deal in its current form.
It's disappointing, but it's not unexpected. I think the lack of information that the tribunal got, and it makes it difficult to kind of predict what might happen in the future. And I stand by my statement that the government's attitude and behaviour towards Māori and to all New Zealanders and to claimants in that tribunal process is just absolutely contemptuous.
The Waitangi Tribunal heard 9 claims from more than 20 claimants, with the primary issue for inquiry whether or not the Treaty of Waitangi Exception Clause provided an effective protection for the interests of Māori. According to the tribunal, the clause in the TPPA will be likely to operate as intended and therefore can be said to offer a reasonable degree of protection to Māori interests. An expert advisor to the claimants, Auckland University Professor Jane Kelsey, says the response is pragmatic.
Prospect that the tribunal was ever going to turn around and say that the government shouldn't ratify or that it should go back and renegotiate, I think were very limited. I think it's pretty clearly signalled that whilst it's saying it's a reasonable protection, the tribunal itself is troubled. It's made some pretty clear indications that the process needs to be fixed up, and the exception would be wise to revisit the exception because there are future negotiations.
The tribunal is concerned with the protections and rights given to foreign investors under the TPPA, describing them as extensive. It says the rights of foreign investors to bring claims against the New Zealand government, in its view, raise serious questions, and that those claims may have a chilling effect on the Crown's willingness or ability to meet its treaty obligations. The constitutional advisor for the claimants, Moana Jackson, says he doesn't think the tribunal understands how the mechanics of investor-state dispute resolutions work.
The main weakness, if we use that word, is that the Crown decides whether there's a possible breach of treaty, and seeing the Crown as responsible for every other treaty breach that has occurred. And it's rather like the Crown being a judge in its own cause, and that's really problematic. I think the fact that the Crown hasn't used similar clauses in the past would indicate it's not likely to use it in this case as well.
The tribunal also suggests the Crown and Māori have further talks. Moana Maniapoto says it's not over yet, and through her music she says there'll be more opportunities to speak out. For Checkpoint, Mihingarangi Forbes.
6:15 is the time. The Labour Party is arguing a recent trip to China by 2 National MPs, which was paid for by a company that makes big donations to the National Party, was nothing more than a sales pitch for the business. National MP Stuart Smith and Jamie Lee Ross toured China as guests of an infant formula manufacturer, GMP Dairy, which donated $25,000 to National last year. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has been looking at this.
The National Party MPs met with GMP Dairy customers and distributors on their recent trip to China and attended a food safety conference there too. Labour's primary industry spokesperson Damien O'Connor says it looks like the National MPs were helping sell GMP Dairy's products.
It's a very unfortunate situation. What you've had is New Zealand exporters of infant formula shut out of the Chinese market. A few chosen Chinese controlled companies have got access. One of them donates to the National Party, and then we've got 2 MPs as salespeople for that very company going up into China and selling the company's product, not New Zealand necessarily.
But the MP for Kaikoura, Stuart Smith, says that's not the case.
Well, I didn't see it in that way, and I don't think anyone who travelled along with me would have seen it in that way at all. So I didn't make any sales calls or anything like that. I learned there's a lot of opportunities in the market there for New Zealand milk powders, particularly infant formulas and adult formulas, and indeed also for organic adult formulas.
And the Prime Minister John Key says donations to National shouldn't stop the party's MPs from being engaged.
It's quite possible that an individual or company that gives a donation is also the sort of situation where an MP goes and has some involvement, does something in a business or looks at something because of the very nature of the varied trips that they do. But it doesn't stop someone. You don't have a conflict of interest by nature because of that.
GMP Dairy has manufacturing facilities in Auckland where it produces nutritional milk powder, certified organic milk powder and infant formula. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
In about 12 and a half minutes, it's World Watch with Rowan Quinn tonight. That is at 6:30, but some good things between now and then. The Department of Conservation we are turning to now has made over $1 million harvesting native timber, which fell during a cyclone on the west coast. Urgent legislation was required to allow the timber to be extracted after Cyclone Eta hit back in April 2014. The harvesters flooded the market with over 5,000 cubic metres of timber, but a company which harvests native forest on private land on the coast says the market here is not in good shape due to cheap imports from overseas. Sally Murphy has been looking at this.
86% of the coast was locked up into conservation estate when the Labour government put a ban on native logging in 2000. When Cyclone Eta hit, DOC was granted access to extract some of the timber which fell during the storm. DOC project manager Tim Shaw says over 500,000 cubic metres of timber has been harvested. 90% of it is rimu.
By the time the project's done its dash, we'd be around the 1.5 total in terms of gross revenue. So once we take the costs of implementation out of that, we've got somewhere between 1 and 1.2 million to spend on conservation.
Mr Shaw says the project has created 50 jobs on the coast. He says although the wood is a significant amount for the market, the price has remained stable over the last 2 years.
Operators that are extracting the timber are also milling it, and they're milling it up into timber, and that timber's going into a variety of end uses in the domestic market, totally within the domestic market. Flooring, furniture, mouldings, architraves, those sorts of quality high-end stuff is where it's all gone.
New Zealand Sustainable Forestry Products exclusively processes Indigenous forest on private land. Company manager John Campbell says there's headroom in the market, but overseas imports greatly affect the industry.
Our market in New Zealand for specialist timbers or specialty timbers is about $100 million, and the Indigenous sector at the moment supplies about 20 million of that. So we're importing a lot of timbers from offshore, from all over the world. And we're importing about $260 million worth of wooden furniture.
Mr Dronefield says operators work under strict environmental rules and work very sustainably, so imports should reflect the same values.
We've now locked up all our resources and we're importing wood from the Amazon basin, from Papua New Guinea. We're bringing in thousands of cubic wheeler oak from America, stuff from all over the place. Probably over 50 to 60% of it is, just does not meet the standard of regulation that we're forced to operate under.
Therese Gibbons, who fought the initial decision to ban native logging, says a return of sustainable forestry would create much needed jobs on the coast.
We've been shafted hugely by different governments. The Labour Party let us down hugely when they stopped native logging. If anybody knew how to do native logging, the best way it was the West Coast. And we fought a big battle. West Coast ended up with $120 million out of it, but at the end of the day, we lost the jobs. And what we need most is jobs, and I believe there's huge potential in the timber industry.
The government is conducting a growth study on the coast to identify areas which could create opportunities in the struggling region. Economic Development Minister Stephen Joyce says it's too early to say if forestry could be explored.
There's plenty of people on the West Coast that think that the consecutive governments have ruled out too much. So let's not rule out things at this point. Let's have a look at all the options.
The special legislation allowing the harvest of the native timber expires in 2019. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Coming up, we go to Mangere for something a bit special. But first, let's go back to the US. He's demolished his Republican rivals. Donald Trump is turning his attention to his plans for when he's in the Oval Office. He's unveiled a raft of priorities for his first 100 days if he becomes the next US president. Among them, a design for that wall, the one he wants to build on the Mexican border. At the weekend, part of the border was opened up for just 20 minutes to allow several divided families to meet up. The BBC's Katie Watson reports from the Mexican border town of Tijuana.
For Carmen, weekends are sacred. Her 3 grandsons come over to Tijuana from San Diego, and the family tucks into tamales, delicious Mexican corn dough steamed in a corn husk. They're a very typical Mexican family, living on both sides of the border. 15 years ago, Carmen and her children crossed over to the US illegally, but she had to come back to Mexico for family reasons, so now there's a gaping hole in her life. She hasn't seen her youngest daughter Gabby for 6 years. Gabby has a temporary permit to live in the States, but she can't leave, and Carmen's not allowed into the US. It's torn the family apart.
Desafortunadamente, los Estados Unidos es como, pues, una droga.
Unfortunately, the US is like a drug. When you try it, you can't live happily in Mexico anymore. It makes life harder. In my case, it was worse because we had sold up our whole life. My whole world came crashing down. I had nowhere to go.
¿Quién es ella? ¿Quién es ella, la niña de ahí?
Gabby lives in San Diego with her husband and 2-year-old son Leo and loves it there. But she's not hugged her mum in years, and that hurts. A month or so ago, an opportunity of a lifetime came up. On Facebook, she saw a page that was inviting people to apply to see their families, with US Border Patrol opening up the fence for 20 minutes.
As soon as I saw that post on Facebook that they were going to do the opening, I gave like to that page, but I didn't want to send my form because I was scared. I told my sister, it's immigration, like, they're going to check my background. And I know I don't have nothing illegal or anything, but I was scared. And then I decided, you know what, if I get approved, I get approved. If not, then it doesn't matter.
It's an event initiated by a group called Border Angels, which advocates for human rights related to border issues. Enrique Morones is the director.
We refer to it as a wall. I know the Border Patrol refers to it as a fence. The symbolism. You have a fence with your neighbor, but a wall, just the image of a wall, because it's different. And it's more important now than ever because the whole world is watching. People are so closed-minded about their own views all over the world. And here the United States is a country that many countries admire. And it's so important that we practice, the United States practices what it preaches in actions, not just in words. So I couldn't think of a better time when you're going to have the most important presidential election in the history of the United States. To instead of talking about building walls, to be literally opening doors.
Saturday was the big day. Gabby and Carmen both full of nerves. The meeting took place at Friendship Park. It's the one place along the 3,000-kilometre border where families can connect at the weekend.
There's a huge door that's bolted. It's actually an emergency door between the two countries, but it's nicknamed the Door of Hope, and it's where the families are meeting. When the rusty door was opened, there was hardly a dry eye on the border.
Te amo mucho, perdóname. Yo también te amo.
En el momento que toco a mi hija, the moment I touched my daughter, I felt her warmth again. I felt her again. I had so many things running through my mind. I wish this wall wasn't here so I could be with her more.
But it's not getting easier. In the past few years, US Border Patrol has reinforced the fence, and people here are afraid that the war of words among presidential candidates will not only lead to this wall becoming even stronger, but could make moments like this impossible.
This is the BBC's Katie Watson. Lovely piece. And here's something lovely. Paul Lesoa is a 15-year-old. He's lived in the South Auckland suburb of Mangere all his life. He's very proud of where he comes from and his school, Mangere College. But Mangere can get a bit of a bad rap in the media, and often the publicity tends to be bad news about issues like youth crime and drug dealing, and people get, well, stereotyped. Paul says his community and school is far greater than bad news or figures, and he wrote a really fantastic letter to his local paper, the 275 Times, in a bid to encourage other Mangere youth to help change its reputation and believe in themselves. Paul is joining us now. Hi, Paul, are you there?
Hi, John.
Hey, lovely to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really good. Can you read us, for people who don't know about this letter, because not all our listeners live in Mangere, can you read them some of your letter?
Yeah, sure. So, the schools in Mangere may not have the flashiest facilities or have the luxuries that other schools have, but we have a bond. We can relate to each other, and we all have a common goal, and that's to make our parents proud. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet your parents are proud.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the website. There's a really nice media release. I think it's come out from the 275 Times. Since going online on Tuesday evening, the post has now been viewed by over 50,000 people, received over 1,500 likes, and shared over 150 times. Did you think it would have that kind of impact?
Not really. When I first forwarded to them, I thought it would just be just a local community. But finding out today, I'm really surprised of how viral it went.
And why did you write it, Paul?
I wrote this to notify people that my school, Mangi College, isn't a bad school. I wrote this letter because I have pride in my school, pride in where I come from. Another reason why I wrote this letter was because I wanted to break the stereotype that people hold against my school and our community.
And so what sort of things do you hear about yourselves externally in the media from people who are not from your community? What is the thing you're most often told about yourself?
That we're bad people and that we do a lot of bad things.
Yeah, which is a really damaging message to get as a 15-year-old, isn't it? Because this is meant to be a time in your life where you believe that everything is possible. Do you think that has an impact on people in your community?
Yeah, I think it really gives us a mindset that we can't do a lot of good things. You know, the media portray us as what we're not. We're not bad people. We're actually good people.
What's your ambition? I mean, I know you're only 15 and I've got a 15-year-old daughter and I say to her all the time, what do you want to do? And she says, I don't know, Dad. Well, she doesn't say it in quite such sniffy terms. Do you have any idea what you want to do?
I want to help as much people as I can, both younger and older.
Do you? And how do you want to go about doing that?
I don't mind doing community things all around, if I get lucky, around New Zealand.
And making people believe in themselves, making people believe that actually they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect and understanding rather than stereotypes, right?
Right.
Yeah. Mm. Have you still got that 11 in your eyebrow?
Yeah.
For Jonah?
Yeah, I just redid it yesterday.
Did you? He was a fine mangere man, eh?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. Really lovely to talk to you, Paul. Thank you. Fantastic letter. And really great way to end Checkpoint for tonight. Paul Lesoa, a proud Mangere student and a credit to his school, Mangere College, bringing Checkpoint to a close on this Thursday evening. Thank you for your company. We really love having you with us. We will be back again on Radio New Zealand National, RNZ National, tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Corrections Department is satisfied with the way the private prison operator Serco handled a clash between prisoners and guards at a South Auckland jail. Wellington's District Health Board has begun legal action over leaky pipes at its 8-year-old regional hospital. Heavy rain that's caused flooding in the lower North Island is easing, but commuters are urged to take care. And the government is looking at bulk buying electric cars in a bid to get 64,000 of them on the roads. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM on RNZ National, International and online. I'm Rowan Quinn. Tonight, there's nothing left between Donald Trump and the Republican presidential nomination. There's a truce in Syria, but the US